conversation, because
please
it's a waste of good time with so many young people there and Professor Paul Srivastava in our midst. Actually, the first baby steps of sustainability in I Am Shillong, we took it by holding his hand. That was in 2008. And since then, we have hopefully come a long way. And the first module of the foundation course was actually designed and executed with his help, Professor Paul Srivastava. And after that, a number of faculty have come in from different parts of the world. And this time around, he comes in virtually. So there are a lot of concerns that Professor Srivastava has. And one of the concerns that he's been consistently working on is to bring in aesthetics into management education. And that is something that he has been doing for the last decade or so. So he is a known name in the world of sustainability. And actually, there's a lot of things that I Am Shillong has learned from him. I have personally learned from him. He was one of the initiators of the World Business School Council for Sustainable Business, which made a report that was presented at the Rio Earth Conference. And we are hoping that in time, it will become the document that would lead management education to the future. So maybe, sir, you might want to share something on aesthetics in management, because that is something which I don't see has come on to the slides that you have shared. And I think the audience would be very, very grateful to hear on that.
Yeah.
Yes, Sanjoy.
Yeah, he says he has joined.
Okay.
Can we locate him, please?
It depends on what name he's joined in.
I just spoke to him. He says that I'm watching.
Okay, that's lovely. There's no need to locate him. That's fine. So I would start the proceedings. I know that in our confusion as to whether people have joined or not, we have lost 10 minutes. I apologize on behalf of everybody. But it is not on a note of apology that I would want to start. I would like to want to start on the note of celebration. And sustainability is certainly a celebration for us at I Am Shillong, and hopefully for the rest of the world. Before we start formal proceedings this evening, I would like to request my friend and colleague, Professor Sanjay Mukherjee, to give a salutation, sir, to you.
Good evening from India and Namaskar. We begin with an invocation. First from the Upanishads. Anandam Brahmeti Vyajanat Anandadheva Khalvimani Bhutani Jayante Anandam Jatani Jivanti Anandam Prayanti Abhisangvishantiti Tad Brahma. Bliss is the manifestation of the Supreme Being. From bliss, all creations emerge. In bliss, all creations are sustained. Unto bliss, all creations find their final consummation. This is the supreme knowledge. Now, who will show us this supreme knowledge? Blessed are we are in the northeast, the Ishan corner in the Indian tradition, the land of the Guru, the great master. So we conclude the invocation with a homage to the Guru. Only 2 days back we had the Guru Purnima. Ajnananasham niyato prakasham Satchit Swarupam Jagadeka Murting Vishwasrayam Vishwapating Paresham Srimad Gurum Nitarang Namami. O thou piercer of the veil of ignorance, O thou the effulgent one forever, O thou existence and consciousness personified in one single worldly manifestation, O thou the sustainer and the Lord of this universe, O thou the great master, the Guru, I bow to thee forever. We conclude with the chanting of peace at the physical, material, the natural, and the psychical, all the three levels. Om Shanti. 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 May this herald an auspicious beginning.
Thank you very much. We would have lit a lamp, we would have prayed, but in the virtual world, it's all in the mind. I take great pleasure and privilege in introducing you to the 8th edition of the Sustainability Conference that I am Shillong host, the Suscon. This was supposed to be sometime last year, but thanks to the extraordinary situation that prevails all over the world, we had to postpone it, and we thought that it's no longer possible to postpone it, so we decided to have it virtually. We would have loved to welcome all of you in person, but that is not to be. We shall still do that. We have left it for another day. The Sustainability Conference for I Am Shillong has always been a celebration of the bringing together of hearts, minds, and practitioners, the head, the heart, and the hands. And we shall see a number of experts come in over the next couple of days, sharing their ideas, their research, their thoughts, all in the hope that we can make a difference in a world that is becoming increasingly unsustainable. Our neighbor and the guru to the world, thanks to their bringing in of the happiness index, Bhutan. The world owes a lot to them because they have shown the world that it is not only money and GDP that makes a difference, it is happiness. And we are very fortunate that the president of the institute looking after happiness, Mr. Dasho Karmaura, is with us today. In fact, he was designated as the chief guest of the conference even last year. And last year would have been so much better for us because that was supposed to be held physically and we would have met him. But nonetheless, thank you very much, sir, for sparing the time to come in. There is a lot that the world can learn from Bhutan, and we look forward to an exchange of ideas, because I take pride in announcing to this august body this evening that Indian Institute of Management Shillong and the Bhutan Institute have become partner organizations and would be working together in this field. So thank you, and we look forward to an amazing future for both these institutions and for this region and the world. Mr. Dasho Karmaura is the chief guest for today's function, and the guest of honor is Mr. Paul Srivastava, whom I have already introduced as the person whose hands we held as we took our first baby steps towards sustainability in the year 2008. Since then, he has been a source of inspiration, a source of support, and a source of help in everything that we have tried to do. Thank you very much, sir, for finding the time to come and sparing so much of your thoughts and guidance in the years that have flown by. Our director, Professor D.P. Goel, was eagerly looking forward to this conference, and he was taking stock at every stage as to how we are progressing, what is happening. But somehow at the nth hour today, he was unable to attend the inaugural function. And on his behalf has come the Dean External Relations, Professor Naliniprava Tripathy. I would like to also welcome her to the inaugural. And I can see a lot of my colleagues who are there. They have been working around the clock. It's been a tough conference because of internet issues and other things. Thank you, everyone, for joining in. And I can see that we have crossed 300 mark in terms of viewership in the Zoom link. And just to inform the viewers, this is also being live streamed in Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. So the number of people listening to us is quite high. There's been a lot of interest in this conference and in what we are going to do following the conference. We are planting saplings. We are calling them the sapling of hope in the celebration of life in honor of all the speakers who will speak in this conference. Since we have shifted to a new campus in Umsauli, a 120-acre campus, we have taken upon ourselves the plan of greening this campus with traditional trees. The other thing which Mr. Paul Srivastava would be so happy to know is that we have taken upon an ambitious plan of trying to create a living root bridge within the campus. And this is something that he's been very excited about, the living root bridge. I know that most of us, all of us, may not be around to see the bridge in completion because it takes more than 100 years. But I'm sure that the generations to come will thank us for having started the bridge. So without standing in between the speakers and the audience, I would now like to call upon our Dean External Relations, Professor Naliniprava Tripathy, to give the welcome address. Madam, it's all yours.
Yeah. Good evening to one and all, honorable guests, eminent scholars, colleagues, dear students, and ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of I am Shillong, and on behalf of our director, Professor D.P. Goel, it is a great pleasure for me to welcome you all to the 8th Annual International Conference on Sustainability. This is a global event, Center for Bhutan Studies and Gross National Happiness Research is our academic partner, and European SPS Institute is our collaborative partner. I would like to take this opportunity to express our deep appreciation for Professor Dasho Karmaura, President, Center for Bhutan Studies and Gross National Happiness Research, for honoring us a chief guest speech for this conference. I also wish to give special thanks to Dr. Paul Srivastava, Chief Sustainability Officers, Pennsylvania State University, USA, for taking the time to grace our occasion as a guest of honor. I must also mention and thank Dr. Paul Srivastava for his invaluable help and advice ever since the establishment of I am Shillong. I welcome all the eminent speakers and guests from all over the country, from different walks of life, participates here to share their knowledge and experience. I also welcome the representatives of governments, industry associations, and NGOs who have joined us. I'm very happy and grateful that so many distinguished scholars have participated virtually to share their research knowledge in this platform. This conference will provide a valuable opportunity for the research scientists, industry specialists, and decision makers to share experiences. Before going to brief about our conference overview, I would like to share a few lines about your institute. Indian Institute of Management Shillong was established in 2007 by the Government of India with the objective of offering world-class management education and research in the country. However, we have started our postgraduate program in the year 2008. With just its 13th year of operation, IIM Shillong has taken many initiatives and achieved milestone through number of programs conducted within very short span of period. Currently, we are offering 2-year full-time MBA program, 1-year MBA program for executives for managing business in emerging economies. We are also offering 2-year MBA for working executive, 4-year doctoral program, 3-year doctoral program for working professionals, management development program for executives, officers, and policymakers, SEDNER program to cater to the needs of the local people of this region. We at IIM Shillong offers comprehensive range of certificate courses covering different areas, enabling the participants to make out their choice as per their interest and career goals. We are also having the incubation center with primary objective is to promote entrepreneurship in the Northeast region of India. We are also providing supportive environment to the entrepreneurs during the critical stage of starting up new business. Our Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam Center for Policy Research and Analysis supports the state of Northeast India and implementing agencies to plan and execute projects properly. Institute is also actively involved in sponsored research and consultancy to solve the targeted problems of industry, businesses, and government organizations. Our vision is to become an internationally recognized management institute with a global outlook grounded in Indian values. Our mission is to produce innovative leaders with strong ethical values. Our core values are openness to new ideas and experiences, adherence to fair, just, and ethical practices, and compassion for others. Now, so far the conference is concerned, sustainability has recently entered the heart of public discourse across generations and societal groups. Sustainability actually refers to 4 distinct areas: human, social, economic, and environmental, known as the 4 pillars of sustainability. Sustainability is not only related to the environmental issues, it is also related to social equity and economic development. Sustainability attempts to bridge social science with environmental science and with the technology of the future. It's time to think about renewable fuel sources, reducing carbon emissions, protecting the environment, and keeping the fragile ecosystem of our planet in stability. Sustainability protects our natural environment, human and ecological health, while driving innovations and not compromising our way of life. The COVID-19 pandemic has made it clear that insufficient preparation can have serious consequences. There is no vaccine against the climate crisis, but we can still fight it and prepare for its inevitable consequence. The effects of climate change are already suffered the entire world. The new strategy of adaptations to the climate change enables us to accelerate and scale up our preparations. If you prepare now, you still have a chance to build resilience to climate change in the future. The climate change threatens the whole global ecosystem by causing serious meteorological disasters like droughts, fires, and floods, which are becoming increasingly frequent and more extreme. We are exposed to air pollution and water contamination. Experts estimate that nearly 90% of humanity breathes polluted air. Contaminated water also causes major health problems. Pollution of the oceans, seas, and inland waters. There are serious environmental problems relating to the oceans, such as damage to ecosystem from dumping pollutants, wastewater, and fuel spills. There is a slow energy transition and insufficient share of renewable energy. Quite a number of the world's population depends on fossil fuels for the cooking. overexploitations of the natural resources and disturbance of the environment exhaust the soil and damage the marine ecosystem. Significant development of modern cities and without comprehensive urban strategy and the growth of cities is a big environmental challenge. We are also exposed to hydric stress and water scarcity. The lack of these resources affects more than 40% of the world populations. Many essential resources are non-renewable resources, but they are being unreasonably exploited. Unrestricted human activity caused increasing pollutions, which significantly threaten the health and safety of human beings. Therefore, we must advocate for the harmonious coexistence of humans and nature, rationally develop and utilize resources, pay attention to environment, and build the future of human development based on the sustainable development. Sunshine, air, water, and land have produced everything that we are familiar with. Humans and nature can only mutually benefit from each other, and resources can only achieve sustainable development when the cycles of nature are followed. We need to understand the mutual dependence on humans and the environment and take environmental protection seriously. Focus has to be on overall human development. It should be recognized that human beings and nature are interdependent and interrelated components of the Earth system. We must admit that we will never be able to live independently from the other elements of nature, such as animals, plants, and even microorganisms. It is essential for us to promote the concept of sustainable development through the environmental education. Society must constantly work towards resetting the compass for a peaceful, harmonious, and happy environment. Holistic thinking and action is essential today. I wish you all the best in your debates, deliberations, and learnings over the next 3 days. I hope that you will gain new perspectives and develop innovative solutions to the many challenges we are facing today. I wish you will be discovered multiple facets of peace, happiness, and harmony through this conference. Wish you a successful conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you, madam. Thank you for giving us not an overview of I am Shillong, but also a beautiful picture, wide angle picture of what sustainability is all about. Thank you. Now I'd like to request Professor Sanjoy Mukherjee to kindly speak a few words and introduce us to the chief guest for the inaugural. Over to you, Professor Mukherjee.
Good evening, friends. I would like to make it short because we are running short of time. Just 3 points I would like to highlight about Suscon. One is it's not just sustainability from the environmental point of view only. Our engagement with sustainability since day one had been covering all possible dimensions of sustainability, from individual self to organization, economy and business, the society, the community, environment, nature, planet, the cosmos. Number one. Number two, we try to integrate all our stakeholders in this conversation, ongoing conversation on sustainability. It's not just within the periphery of I am Shillong, but it includes all our stakeholders. And number three, it is not just an academic event or a conference. It is for us in I am Shillong an ongoing movement which we pursue with our vision, our mission, and our passion. So I thought I would highlight only these three. The rest is there to follow in the days to come. Before we go on to introduce our chief guest, I have a pleasant duty to inform you, because I see the name. Professor Dr. Laszlo Zolnai is with us. He is the president and director of Business Ethics Center of Corvinus University of Budapest, and the director and the president of the European Space Institute. European Space Institute, friends, I must mention, that is also a collaborator for this conference, along with the Center for Bhutan Studies and GNH Research. So welcome to Professor Laszlo's Alumni, whom I see there. From IIM Shillong. There are many speakers also, distinguished speakers like Ashok Das, Bhaskar Basu, and Sai Chandrasekhar, who are going to come in the days to come. I see their names, so a warm welcome to them, apart from the others. Now it's my pleasant duty, friends, to introduce someone whom I not just respect, but I revere. The chief guest for this occasion, for Suscon, 8th edition of Suscon, is Shri Dasho Ura. Dasho Sir, whom I call him Dasho Sir, is the president of the Center for Bhutan Studies and GNH Research, Gross National Happiness Research. He was a member of the drafting committee of Bhutan's first constitution, enacted in 2008. He was awarded the Red Scarf and the title Dasho by His Majesty, the 4th King, in December 2006 in Bhutan. He was the director of CBS, Center for Bhutan Studies, since inception in 1999 until 2008, when he became its president. He initiated to organize the concepts of Gross National Happiness, GNH, and led the survey, which was done in 2007 and 2010 in Bhutan. In the year 2015, on a personal note, friends, I had the opportunity to be in Paro for a few days to attend the GNH conference. The anchor, the central figure of that conference was Shri Dasho Ura. It was held not in an auditorium, but in the sprawling gardens of the Royal Palace in Paro, under hugely constructed tents covering about more than 1,500 participants, experts, practitioners, thinkers from all over the world. It was a kind of a transformational experience for me when I decided that I will get Dasho Sir once in IIM Shillong. Last year, it couldn't happen, as my colleague and friend, Professor Sanjeeb Kakoty has mentioned, because of the pandemic, but at least this time we have Dasho Sir online with us as the chief guest of this conference. Welcome, sir, and the floor is yours now for the address of the chief guest. Shri Dasho Ura, sir.
Sanjay, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. We do hear you.
Clearly?
Yes, sir. We clearly hear you.
Thank you very much, Professor Sanjay, for that warm but equally exaggerated introduction about myself. Let me welcome others like Professor Laszlo, with whom I have also been corresponding. But may I first of all thank Professor Sanjeeb Kakoty, Naliniprava, and your director, Goyal. Is he there or is he away?
He's not there, sir, at this moment.
In absentia, may I also greet him?
Sure.
I'm going to give you an overview, discuss a little bit about the institutional background of gross national happiness, hence I will abbreviate as GNH, and go over the domains of GNH. Then I will come to some practical issues about the surveys, and then a little bit about methods of estimation and calculation. And finally, about how it is being applied in the administration of the country to some degree. It is far from adequate, but we are trying hard. And lastly, some remarks on holism and harmony, which you have also put as part of the topic I should address. So, professors, faculty members, graduates, it's a great honor for me, and I thank Sanjay for this arrangement. To begin with, Meghalaya is not far from Bhutan, and it was as part of Assam long ago, much in contact with Bhutan. Our regions have had connections throughout the known and the unknown part of our histories, with unknown part being much longer, of course. We usually think of contacts and contacts across the region in terms of exchange between human beings. But these are not the only important flows across the region. As you know, monsoon clouds float up down from Meghalaya and Assam to the mountains of Bhutan, animating the landscape with rains, and then rivers run down to the plains of Assam. Birds, fish, wild animals move across the boundaries of our two countries, traditionally never interrupted over their seasonal migration. And these mammals and creatures bring seeds to be dispersed and biodiversity to be enriched wherever they go. With greater communication infrastructure connecting the two countries, there is an ever-increasing flow of goods and services, money and people, workers and tourists across our region. Your kind invitation is an opportunity for me to enhance contacts between Bhutan and Meghalaya, and between your esteemed management institution and our humble office. And I thank you for arranging this occasion once again, Professor Sanjay. I would like to facilitate the faculty and students who inhabit your renowned institute, IIM Shillong, for holding the 8th International Sustainability Conference. I would like to punctuate my talk with some slides and also a movie clip. And let me try to share the screen if I can. Can you see my screen?
Yes, yes, sir. Clearly.
So going briefly over the institutional background of cross-national happiness, I have the pleasure to speak on one of the fortunate responsibilities I have had, which is triggering the application of GNH. But the GNH was actually founded and authored by the fourth king of Bhutan, whom you see here, with Dr. Nalini just mentioned, Kalam Center in your institute, President Abdul Kalam, and the great poet and orator, Prime Minister of India, Vajpayee. So it is His Majesty, the fourth king of Bhutan, who actually founded GNH in the 80s. Some of you might have already seen him in the photos. He is an embodiment of good look, but to be combined with charisma is something else. He was very charismatic. More importantly, there are thousands of people who are charismatic in their own ways and rights. But more importantly, he was inspirational by his very disciplined life and by his clarity on what to do, and equally important, what not to do most of us lose our way because we jump, like me, to do many things and spread the energies too far and wide and achieve nothing. So what not to do is equally an important part of determination of great people. As I said, you lose a lot of time by doing what you should not do. And he was not one of those. In 2002, fourth king of Bhutan launched a constitution drafting process for Bhutan, leading to multi-party democracy and directly elected government through universal franchise that took place in 2008. The constitution of Bhutan includes the provision obliging the state, among other policies, to pursue policies and conditions favorable to GNH. Now, the fourth king of Bhutan abdicated his throne in 2006. So the fifth king, His Revered Majesty Jigme Khesar, whom you see here with the former ambassador of Bhutan, Sudri Vyas, and one of your eminent international relation expert, Mr. Menon, whom you see here, the fifth king directed the government to initiate an index for GNH in 2007. You might be aware of our present king. He's highly qualified, very futuristic, and particularly insightful about artificial intelligence and high tech. But there are millions of people who, by force of the change in technology and science, are interested in these things. But what distinguishes him is his care for his people in a very authentic way. COVID has ravaged the lives and hopes of a large section of global population, as Dr. Nalini just mentioned. His Majesty the King has not allowed the Buddhist people to face any sudden adversity. So life goes on here in a very normal way. But not so normal for him. Day in, day out, he's been traveling around the country. And then his travels are punctuated by relative solitude of quarantine, which he has also to follow. This is a government rule. He's just now in southern Bhutan, and when he comes in a week's time, he will be quarantined in Thimphu for 2 weeks. Now, under the guidance of His Majesty, United Nations General Assembly also considered GNH in 2011. I was there at the United Nations, where Bhutan recommended to the United Nations to make the governments worldwide to focus their policies on happiness and well-being. And as you know, the UN has declared March 20 to be World Happiness Day. On that day each year, a fresh edition of the World Happiness Report is released by a group of scientists. I'm on its council. Purpose of the World Happiness Day is to remind individuals and governments of a greater purpose, a more fundamental goal for the people to grow up happily as children, or bring them up happily as children, of living well and working meaningfully, and also at the end of our brief life, of dying with a sense of meaning and dignity. The Economist has noted that the satellite images of Indian cities during this pandemic showed that the nights were brighter. Alas, it is not because of luminosity of Diwali or electrical lights. It was because of the funeral pyres all over India. In this regard, the level of world happiness must have been seriously affected. But those who are fortunate under good leadership have averted this a little bit. The World Happiness Report uses data from the World Gallup poll collected in a comparable way from more than 150 countries. The country rankings are based on one single 10-point scale question called the Cantilada for life evaluations, along with positive emotions or effects like the degree of enjoyment, level of trust, calmness, etc. But I would like to mention that it must be noted that what the GNH measures as happiness and what the World Happiness Report measures as happiness are very different. GNH measures different things, and GNH strives towards both depth and breadth of what we measure. After His Majesty the King commanded the formulation of GNH Index in 2007, the concept of 9 domains of GNH was adopted with much discussion by the government. To itemize, the 9 domains are psychological well-being, community vitality, balanced use of time over 24 hours, environmental resilience, cultural diversity, good governance, education, health, and living standard. Under each domain, there are on average about 30 variables. And so the composite GNH index, which I just showed a moment ago, crunches actually about 277 variables. Though the GNH domains are categorized separately, there is independence and non-linear relationship between and among them, and none stand in isolation from the other. A broad set of means of happiness are charted schematically in the 9 domains of GNH. And now it differs a little bit from what economics or economic theory tells us. For example, in the assumptions in neoclassical economic theory, you see the people are sort of very aware of prices. They make, they are supposed to make very efficient decisions and so on and so forth. But unlike the assumptions in the economic theory, GNH does not see human being as having perfect information of the market clearing prices. GNH doesn't assume human being as having a lot of knowledge about quality of goods and knowledge about efficient suppliers of goods and services. That leads him or her to optimize satisfaction. Rather, in GNH, human beings' happiness draw on their dependence on community, families with whom they reciprocate. GNH sees people as striving to transform their mental states towards calmness, generosity, joyfulness, compassion. And GNH also recognizes people as cultural and historical beings, perpetuating values, skills, and identities that moors and anchors them like a tiny boat in an horizonless sea of change. Now, I could show you this kind of chart for each domain but there is no time. So I only show you sample of 2 domains structure. GNH also portrays people as trying to balance their time use over 24 hours with unpaid social works, with maintenance of physical activity and mental vitality, with meaningful work, and finally, at the end of the day, with fulfilling, rejuvenating, sufficient hours of sleep. Now, each domain in the calculation of the index is weighted equally, but that is because we do not yet know something, and that is we do not know the marginal rate of substitution on indifference curves that are well known as heuristics in economics. We do not know the substitution rate between and within 9 domains. It is hard to figure out the substitution between tangible and intangible things, and between one intangible thing with another intangible thing. How much in one domain can be given up in favor of another to obtain the same level of well-being? We do not know yet. That was a question that arose during discussion on the weighting of domains while aggregating. For the moment, each of the 9 domains is equally weighted in the GNH index because each domain we think is important in its own right. Although people agree broadly to the idea that each domain is important in and of itself, the allocation of official budget as a means to happiness and well-being is still underdeveloped. Budget allocation is still skewed, like anywhere else, towards physical and social infrastructure, such as health, education, roads, culture, environment, telecom, agriculture, and energy. This kind of rubric organizational setup is very much suited to calculation of GDP, of which the organizations seems to me to be analog. There is yet no explicit allocation for intangible and relational variables under psychological well-being, community vitality, or balanced time use. Fiscal and organizational design will have to be innovated further in this respect. One day in the future, in truly post-industrial societies, we might have organizations like ministries which are named and pursues goals of such kind instead of the present production, distribution, and consumption-oriented organization. How do I do the movie? Huh? What? Stop him. I didn't see. So I'm having some problem with this one. Okay. Now, I would like to refresh you with a small video about the conduct of the survey of GNH in 2010. Next one.
아테랑라서 신이들이 같은 온데 알루 추구소니 내가 디존이 너 사람 아닌데 함기리데 람네세 자장티우 제리오데 랑 부스레데
사디 아치치뉴 소치웨타도 게사차디고 카카치 토와진다니까
나비 안즈빌 타오니미 위크
아니 숨디디 나산나디디 때때만인가 내리면 나 차디디 뿌라기로 명나 그치 나 이카디디 두루디 기디 미토블라 때문에 아니 중기 롱레슈
Sanjeeb हम small यानी शेयर करना
She. Yeah, I'm correct.
हम hylas hyla
Ansu kaderi çiçeği amor. Ansu bitsin mi açına?
미스나면 같이나 사고는 심이 हम किलो
Oh.
이거 하루
Kaderi. Chula.
얘는
Bir kilo mumda chula çiğme var. Kilo mumda chula am suyu dela.
같이 좀 배우면 항상 좋아하는 뭐지
네. 맞아 센터 맞아요. 정말 잘해서 재밌게 해요. Sanjoy.
이제는 그걸로 지어서 시력이 내려오면서 레는 예지 공부해서 공부하자기 시작하는 소리를 통으로 땅에 주지를 이거인데 내가 생각이 사지
시메 폴리가 이슈면 나라 카트레 된다 그래서 자살을 가도 기존에 예수 신이 나다 그런 기존도 자살에 벼 진짜 숨주대 저디면 올라가도 또 기존도 니네 시티 풀어라 좀이디 근데 도람 잡는 나는 또롱내는 나는 나 라자 gem되면 sempre 사나보다 또 해결아 좀더 집고 그냥
공기감 침문들한 사민이 공기 침문 마시는 거다. 이 찹적들로 그냥 그냥 찹적들 가게 되면 침도 됐으면 아래가 봐도 뭐 아니야 집아도 잠깐씩 주반로 여기는 이잠을 이나와지 않는 잠을 근데 거기서만 나는 모르겠어. 자데 거기 찹적이 오면 나는 무슨 나가다 뭐 추순긴 들어가 같이 가 추순디 거자
보면 잘했어 저는 먹기 이런 사다고 돈 날때
어제를 쉬운데
배도가 네 아니 배도가
빌려
네 나오나 산이 피게 내가 너무
저긴 속도 저긴 남자도 너무 영어도 수능만
그게로 아주면은
진짜 대속이 친날 아우 마셔봐
마소
데르마타면서 자자비에니가
니니나
데르마타 센치 대속이 따다 동 대속이 오면 서다본세
아니 돈이
주로 남 소신에 치 하나래와 템베아말에 포디 온거같이 例えば제자된 스테이트가
당연히 돈입니다.
돈입니다.
돈입니다. 당연히 지내다에 따로 신 안에 기출들이 좀
예,
많죠.
짬입니다. 뭐
So to continue, I like to say that we employ about 100 enumerators, and it takes about 6 months to complete the whole cycle of enumeration throughout the country. And it is one of the most transformative survey experiment probably in the world, because people get opportunity to empathetically understand the life of other people. We need to do this survey every 5 years in order to update our information, and information then is converted into some degree into application on the basis of evidence produced by the survey.
Dasho sir, can you be a bit louder, please?
Yes, this is the loudest. So can you hear me now?
Yeah, better.
Okay. So based on these surveys, we decide on a range of indicators that covered a range of material and non-material variables we collect. Since then, our office has conducted surveys in 2015, and in each survey, about 8,000 randomly sampled households are interviewed. Citizens who are 15 years and above are interviewed, so children are not part of it. As you saw, the face-to-face interviews last quite long, based on structured questionnaire consisting of actually about 244 questions. Now, just a glimpse of how the index is constructed. The last 2 successive surveys resulted in many indicators. Here you see the headlines for indicators, about 33 of them. And the reason for doing this, of course, is to track changes amongst many demographic groups across the country, because the level of happiness differs across demographic groups. The mass of variables or data from the survey are processed into this many indicators you see on the slide. And there are roughly 4 indicators under each domain, as you can see. The method we use for aggregation is something known as this Alkire and James Foster. And Alkire, you might know, Sabina, works a lot with the Niti Aayog in India on measuring multidimensional poverty. James Foster is in Washington University teaching mathematics. One of the distinctive advantage of this particular aggregation method, which is called Alkire and Foster class method, is that it allows for aggregation over a wide range of data types, and the data comes in many forms, but mostly let us say it is on 4-point scale or 10-point scale. But there are also numerical data we collect, objective versus subjective, about half in our survey. Another advantage of this method is that it allows for disaggregation at any demographic level, at geographic level, gender level, any kind of subdomain, and it can be broken down at a punch of a key to the nth level, to the last individual level also if we want, so that we can zoom down at any microscopic detail. We can think of equally weighted domains as simple sets of necessary goods that would improve the condition for happiness. Weighting and aggregation have facilitated the construction of the GNH index and indicators, but it has also drawn complaints about its complexity from the bureaucrats and media. In contrast, the index is regarded to some degree well by some global think tanks and academics. Now I would like to share with you briefly how it is used in the governance of the country. Concepts might be very good, but they have to be tested by practicality of their uses. And so empirical results, application, and then again checking at its soundness is very important. The first one relates to the GNH composite measures, and they are used as a benchmark for the 5-year plan. In the current 12th five-year plan, about 17 baselines or key result targets are from the GNH indicators. I think it's very important to adopt such quantitative framework, because people, if you leave it at qualitative level, the vision is not sharpened enough. So the people can clarify their vision by being able to specify targets and then check whether these targets are met by actual performance by the government. Or in some cases by the people themselves, because some aspects of GNH, some variables are really under the control only of the individuals themselves and their behavior. So they can change their behavior to be more proactive when it concerns their own well-being and happiness. As you see, the GNH composite index has been changing, and we update it every 5 years, as I said, because that is the length of the time of a 5-year plan. In some ways, we can imagine a national index as a kind of a rough national mirror in which we can objectively view our reflection to judge whether it improves or deteriorates over time. Now, between 2010 and 2015, performance in the domain of health, education, culture, living standard, environment, time use, and good governance improved. Hence, the overall GNH index improved because they occupy huge weight. However, the index number in this also improved only marginally. And so the total improved, as you can see, by a sort of few decimal points. And this year we have not been able to update it because of the pandemic. The 5-year difference, as I said, is only 0.013, which suggests a percentage change growth rate of 1.7% in 5 years, or 0.35% per year. It's very important to know this. Why this is so? This is because not all things improve. Not all things improve if we measure most things that matter, and they offset the gains made in other areas. If you focus only on production and consumption, of course, things change rather dramatically, and as a result, the growth rates like GDP impresses most people. But it doesn't measure everything. It's somewhat unidimensional. So the slow rate of change is a consequence of 277 variables, some of which fall back during broader movement forward. So you can see the performance in the domain of psychological well-being, community vitality, and to some degree time use declined over that period. In contrast, the growth rate of GDP gives dramatic percentage changes, but the method of calculation in GDP, as the previous speakers alluded, does not include the true cost of its damage in many areas. Dr. Nalini hinted at that. So GDP, in a way, is like a curved mirror with manipulated surface, in which a person who sees at it looks thinner than his or her actual self, you know. So the world looks much better than it is if you limit your understanding of it to GDP. From the beginning, GNH indicators has been constructed as a corrective or a contrast to GDP. Especially, this is the perception in media, that they are oppositional. However, actually it is not oppositional, only the footprint of GDP is minimized in the overall scheme of GNH. Incidentally, you might be interested to know that the Bhutanese per capita income is estimated to be $3,262 this year, equivalent to $11,230 at purchasing power parity. So it is quite high in the region, but it is nowhere near the per capita income of Singapore or so. But the score of Bhutan, when it is done on equivalent measure of Cantil ladder, is roughly the same. The Bhutanese match with the Singaporean score when it is done by some academics. Now I come to the second use of GNH and the second use of GNH index. And this is used as a weighted criteria in the allocation of budget amongst the local governments composed of 20 districts, 4 cities or towns, municipalities, and at the lowest level, 205 counties. So this is the vertical organization of Bhutan, you know, at the lowest level, 205 counties and 4 cities, and then 20 districts and the central government. So the GNH, GNH is used in dividing the money at the district level. Here you see the criteria, this one, you know, where is it? GNH directly carries 10% in the weight, but it also carries additional weight, which are included already in the GNH. So in a way, it is like doubling the effect, like waste disposal, pollution, employment, etc., already included in the GNH. So this is the way it is done in Bhutan. Earlier method was somewhat like India. This is rather crude. It is based on population, area, and poverty, etc. This is still what is done in India, when you divide money from the center. At the GNH index as a weight in dividing money amongst the lowest tier of geographic division of the country, consisting of 200 counties, is much more sophisticated, much more pro-poor, I suppose. Index itself carries 10%, but also it carries further highlighted weights for things like poverty, school-age, unschooled school children, income, under-5 mortality, unhealthy days, so on and so forth. Thirdly, policies in the central government. I must mention that 40% of the capital budget is divided applying these two formulas for the district and for the counties. So 60% is under the control of the ministries at the center. So 40% of the capital budget goes directly by this formula. The effect of these formulas is that more resources go to places where the constituents or conditions of gross national happiness show poorer score. So in a way, if you are unhappy, this formula rewards those places. One economist from Switzerland, he's against this sort of formula because he thinks it can be manipulated. People will declare themselves as unhappy in order to get more resources. I myself don't think people lie like that. Thirdly, policies in the central government are formulated by subjecting them to vetting with GNH policy screening tools, which we have devised. So the policies must pass the test of the GNH policy screening tools, which consist of 22 criteria drawn from the GNH itself, domains. And it is implemented according to a well-defined protocol since 2008. So far, about 16 policy documents or so-called white papers have been subjected to GNH policy screening tools. I don't claim that it is comprehensive at this moment. We need to improve on it, but it's much better than policies passing without any procedures. Fourthly, GNH index has been used to evaluate projects. In this case, a large rural horticultural project after it was completed. It was a 5-year-long project. This is the sort of evaluation interviews going on. The impact study used propensity score matching methods to evaluate the impact of the project on beneficiaries versus non-beneficiaries on all 9 domains of gross national happiness. I think this method of evaluation is very promising and might get diffused over time. As you know, propensity score matching method involves comparison between beneficiaries and non-beneficiaries of a project. The finding again mirrored some sort of GNH change nationally over the last 5 years. Findings showed that the project had positive impact on all 9 domains of gross national happiness, compared to non-beneficiaries. Nevertheless, the more important finding was that the relative changes amongst the 9 domains amongst the beneficiaries. The impact of the project was highest and statistically significant on living standard, which means income and assets, and community vitality. It's quite unusual for projects to boost community vitality, but it happened in this case because the emphasis was on village-wide cooperation and solidarity. So they working together, it promoted working together, which is in fact one of the vehicles of feeling happy. Although not statistically significant, the project tended to, well, not significant at 1% confidence level. The project tended to, 99%, sorry, the project tended to reduce the time for sleep. Time for sleep here. It tended to reduce the time for sleep and thus affect the time use domain negatively. It also tended to, you can see this. It boosted the community relationship, but it reduced sleep time. It increased the work time of the amongst the beneficiaries. So there was a trade-off in this. But this sort of thing never shows up if you only check the income level. So this is for the whole country. The situation in 2015, you can see the civil servants, get up late and sleep late. You can see the, whereas the farmers sleep early and get up early. All over the world, as you know, the time for sleep, the time for friends, for socialization. This is also from GNH 2015. Time for thinking and reflection, which can only be done well in solitude. And time for helping others has tended to shrink as people spend more time in front of their screen. We are all guilty of that. I also find that I spend about 2 hours looking at the screen every day. And the time for work is squeezing time for many other valuable things in the world. Fifthly, GNH is used technically for certifying business. Now, this policy screens, the evaluation of projects, and the certification of business, they are all different methods, though they have commonality based on the principle of GNS, but they are all different processes, slightly different methods. So several state enterprises and leading private company has undergone GNS certification for business last year and year before. A few foreign companies abroad have applied for GNS certification, though the outbreak of COVID-19 has led to their postponement. On a trial basis, a few IT companies in Guwahati was also assessed on GNH business certification. This week this month really, we have been assessing Bhutan Power Corporation, which is the electricity distribution company here, the biggest one, by evaluating them by GNH business certification. It is far more comprehensive than ISO. That is why there is some appeal for it also in Europe a very big company in Italy has applied for being assessed by it. So these are the steps, much more complex and time consuming than ISO or B Corp. And this is the scheme for awarding the certificate. But it's really not pass or fail, but it's an instrument for changing the behavior of business. So overall, to summarize the formal application of GNH, it has been adapted for spatial or geographic budget allocation, for policy screening, for sectoral goal setting, and for evaluating corporate performance in a holistic way. So GNH is functioning as a very modest quantitative framework. I need off how to stop share. Stop. You know. And huh? No, it's here, the behind. Huh? So now I like to close by making a line or two of remark on holism and harmony included in the topic given to me for today's talk. Holism is contrasted with reductionism, and reductionism is related to methodological individualism, particularly used in economics. Now, the ecosystem of all major institutions and designs of human affairs, in order to qualify for holism, in my view, should include happiness and well-being. Happiness and well-being are the proper criteria of flourishing. It should become the first principle in the design of institutions. It cannot be holistic if it is missing the fundamental experience of people and what the people wish for, a state of calmness, relaxation, and peacefulness, pervaded to some extent also by mystical meaningfulness. From the point of view of holism, study of the parts cannot lead to the understanding of the whole, because study of the parts reveal the mechanism how the parts act, but not the process of making the whole. It can never reveal itself, especially the whole in living beings. It may reveal the whole in physical domains, but not in living beings. Study of a part or a component always leaves something behind. Bringing this notion of holism to GNH, it is better to include all the diverse ways and means by which human beings emerge as happy. It's something which bubbles up when you are not consciously waiting for it. It is an emergent property. Unbidden, it arises when things are all right. It is not only consumption or income that matters predominantly for people to be happy. Now, melodious unity is the same concept as harmony, as you all know. We feel harmony when everything seems to be balanced instead of being in precarious balance. This is very much reflected in the Pythagorean understanding of harmony as concordance of the opposites. Ancient philosophers, especially Chinese, were particular in contemplating about the question of political and social order and harmony when they were threatened by change. Chinese thinkers defined harmony as opposition to conformity. Harmony was rather a way of organically and creatively integrating difference rather than suppressing differences. A bit like the Indian idea of unity in diversity. However, there is also doubt that politically motivated interpretation of harmony as conformity under authoritarianism. Somewhat different to the Chinese concept of harmony, ancient Indian philosophers, especially Buddhists, saw the world as ever-changing, brought about by human beings' own intentions and ethics, not by some external agent, but by the motor of change being resolved at the door of human intention and behavior. That also means that harmony is primarily related to the concept of ethics. Now, both harmony and happiness have to be nurtured against its primary threats. And I see my clock that I am approached 58 minutes. I have 2 more minutes, as Sanjay has given to me. Today, the issues and challenges we are facing transcends individual unhappiness. And previous speakers have again directly pointed to this. We are living in an age where we are facing issues bigger than the individual issues about unfortunate birth, about inevitable aging, and even more inevitable terminality of our existence, that is death. And death has become far more terrorizing in the last 2 years. From all the probabilistic forecast, as Dr. Nalini has mentioned already, the earth, as we know, is dying. It has suffered the greatest assault on its biodiversity. And it has been threatened. What has been threatened? Its self-governing temperature regulation has been threatened. So, the South African Jan Smuts' original idea of holism in terms of human being fitting into the ecosystem in an appropriate way. His appropriate way, of course, was controversial. As you know, he had a slightly different view for blacks and a slightly different view for white. Anyway, it rings a bell. How we should fit into the larger churning of the ecosystem is become a very imminent question. So the question of sustainability, which is the theme of your conference, is no doubt urgent in the context of planetary crisis that envelops all creatures, not only human beings, all creatures, and their well-being and happiness. I would like to emphasize that well-being and happiness has to be explored and obtained with far less demand and supply of goods and services, which is exactly the opposite of what most economic growth model will tell you. It is possible, but a different value orientation is necessary. Because human beings can be happy in very many different ways than supposed by the economic growth model. IIM, Shillong, is a cradle of management gurus and startups. of India. And Dr. Kakoty already mentioned that you'd like to go global in this function. In conclusion, I welcome other speakers and participants of this conference who will abundantly chart out your meaningful future roles in this uncertain world. Now I see I have completed my 1 hour cycle, and I'd like to thank you for your undivided attention and good intentions. I apologize most sincerely for my poor talk. Part of the reason, as I told you already, is I'm always doing too many different things due to necessity and never have enough time to do anything very well. But thank you again for giving me the opportunity of sharing my humble views with all of you this evening. And I wish you a brilliant success in changing the mind of young management, gurus, and entrepreneurs. Thank you very much.
We'd like to thank you from the bottom of our hearts for a very insightful presentation. Thank you, sir. It certainly benefited all of us. And we have enough material given by you to mull over for the rest of our sustainability week that we are having at IIM Shillong. I know there might be a lot of questions that have come in, but for the in view of the fact that we're running short of time, and secondly, because of the depth of your talk, and since we also have an association with your institute, many of the questions will be collated and will become part of our conversation in the days to come. So we are not taking any specific questions for this talk. Thank you very much. Now I would like to invite upon our team to kindly make a virtual presentation of a sapling that has been planted in the honor of Mr. Dasho Karmaura. The team, please. So this is a virtual memento, sir, for you. The other one would be going by post. So thank you very much for sparing your time and your thoughts. We shall remain eternally grateful for it. Thank you very much. Thank you, the team.
Thank you very much.
Now, I would like to invite Professor Paul Srivastava, who is somebody who is known all over the world for his pioneering work. The author of at least 18 books and 120 papers. He is the Chief Sustainability Officer and the Director of Sustainability in the Penn State University, USA. He was the Founder Executive Director of the Earth Foundation and Earth Institute. And I wouldn't want to enumerate all the things that he has done in his very, very eventful life. He's an activist, a scholar, a writer, and a teacher par excellence. He also has the coveted recognition of being a full member of the Club of Rome. Now I would like to invite Professor Paul Srivastava for his talk, please. Professor Paul.
Thank you. Good evening to you all. Thank you, Professor Sanjoy Mukherjee and Professor Sanjeeb Kakoty for over a decade of friendship and for keeping the flame of sustainability alive and well at IIM Shillong. I'm really proud of the work you all have been doing. I also want to thank the conference organizing committee, and especially my friend, Dr. Rohit Dwivedi on it, for the truly innovative program that they've put together. This integration of the foundation course, which I had the honor of helping with. And this conference, I think, is a really meaningful way to bring sustainability more into the curriculum and educational program and get wider discussion because I think the real intelligence in this room today is not me or the other speakers, I'm sorry to say. It is the students. It is the next generation for whom we are working towards sustainability. So in addition to sharing my thoughts, I'm hoping the conference will be an occasion for young people to bring out their ideas. And I look forward to learning from them. I also want to thank Director D.P. Goyal and Dean Nalini Tripathi for your support and encouragement of sustainability among IIM faculty, students, and staff. For sustainability to thrive, it needs the full commitment of institutional leaders. And under your leadership, IIM Shillong is showing the way forward for all business schools. I was pleased to hear of the wide range of IIM educational programs that reflect the connection of entrepreneurship and business and economics with sustainability of our earth. Thanks also to Dasho Karmaura for his uplifting message about the gross national happiness movement and the methodological rigors of measuring GNH, which I did not fully understand until his presentation. And also his deep critique of GDP as a measure of economic development. We fully agree that GDP is an old and, in my view, a useless measure for the future, sustainable future of this earth. I've become more familiar with GNH and related concept of well-being through collaboration with Professor Laszlo Zolnai, my friend and co-author, who will be speaking at this conference a little bit later. Also very pleased to note and acknowledge and thank additional friends in the 4-day program. Mary Gentile is here, I believe, Raymond Pecan, and some people whose work I have admired over the years, including Sanjoy Hazarika's writings and Ajay Mathur and Mike Thompson's work. So thank you all. Thank you particularly to the audience for being here today. I wish you all a very productive and fun days of discussion and debate, and hope that it will lead each one of you towards a holistic, harmonious, happy transformation towards sustainability. 13 years ago, in 2008, I came to IIM Shillong to help develop sustainability education for the first batch of students and gave a foundations course. We ended the course with a field trip to the rainforests around Shillong, a most memorable trip for me. We got lost in the forest. It started raining. Our bus with our lunch could not meet us. We faced threat of a flash flood in the river as we were crossing it. Our guide, who was knowledgeable about the forest, fell sick and was disoriented. He could not lead us back to safety. No cell phones worked. Some students had tears in their eyes. Most of them were men. Things looked desperate, and our knowledge of scientific management was not very useful in getting us out of the predicament. Then we spotted a little old woman, bent over with age, with a bundle of firewood on her back. She did not speak our languages, but knew what we needed. She led us back to the village. This event left a deep impression on many of us. Our insight that useful knowledge can come from humble sources. We need to be open to learning and unconventional ideas from unanticipated sources. To understand the world with holism, harmony, and happiness, we will need to get beyond science, beyond management, beyond conventional thinking. And this conference offers us an opportunity to explore these ideas. I'm delighted to be a part of this conversation and get it going. As an overview of what I want to say in my next 30 minutes, I will address holism in terms of the evolution of the earth and humans and what humans have done to it just in the last 250 years. I will use the scientific studies of the great acceleration and so-called human progress and concomitant ecological decline as experienced by planetary boundaries and future anxieties. The whole idea of the Anthropocene for me captures a holistic way of thinking about Earth-human relationships. I'll try to address in the second half a harmonious transition to a planetary civilization, aided by consensus on the Sustainable Development Goals and movement towards gross national happiness, or what I call the well-being economy. And within the context of the well-being economy, I want to say a few words about well-being corporations and well-being finance. I know this will have to be short and cryptic and won't satisfy a lot of you, but I hope it will open up a conversation on this idea of how we move the world towards global planetary well-being. I don't have a full segment on happiness, and I'm still not completely sure what it means in the context of the planet, but I equate happiness with living low carbon lifestyles. So I will end my talk with making some brief observations about living within a global carbon budget and what business schools can do to contribute to that. So with that, let me jump onto a few slides that I have prepared for this talk, and I will share my screen. Hopefully you can see it. Okay, I'm going to start with getting the whole picture. One of the main themes of the conference is holism, and I wanted to make sure that we bring to this discussion of holism not just increasing the encompassing what we are doing today, but a sort of historical evolutionary perspective. The Earth has been around for 4.5 billion years, and out of those 4.5 billion years, Homo sapiens, our ancestors, have been around for, say, about 300,000 years. But the imbalance that we have caused is tremendous. The formation of the Earth 4.5 billion years ago started as a burning mass of matter. It was almost 2 billion years before even free oxygen was available for life to be formed. Insects and seeds started about 400 million years ago. Mammals arrived about 200 million years ago, and human genus, not human beings, not Homo sapiens, but the Homo genus started about 2.5 million years ago. On that sideline on the different ages of the Homo genus, you see that 1.5 million years ago, humans became straight. They started walking. And it was only about 3,000 or 300,000 years ago that we have some indications of our history. From this history of 300,000 years, I want to jump to the last 250. Sorry, let me also just make this in a view slideshow mode so you can see it better. So this is the last 250 years of our existence. And what this study is called is the Great Acceleration. And it refers to the great acceleration of two things. One is humans, and two is its impact on Earth. So on the left-hand side, you see socioeconomic trends. On the right-hand side in blue, you see the Earth system trends. Socioeconomic trends include world population, real GDP, foreign direct investment, urban population, primary use, fertilizer consumption, large dams, water use, etc. And on the right-hand side in blue, you see Earth system trends in terms of the carbon dioxide, nitrous oxide, methane in the atmosphere, stratospheric ozone, surface temperatures, ocean acidification, etc. There are many more variables that this study of great acceleration includes. I've just included a dozen on each side. The time frame for this study is from 1750 to 2010, about a decade ago. In this period of 260 years, you see a kind of generic trend that things remain growing fairly evenly for the first 200 or so years, up to 1950. And then there is a spike or growth. So there's a slow growth and a spike. In every curve, you can see that trend, whether it is socioeconomic trend or Earth system trends. Something happened around the 1950s that has made an acceleration of socioeconomic trends and Earth system trends. Well, this acceleration has been so dramatic that from 1950s onwards, the continued functioning of the Earth system as it has supported human civilizations in recent centuries is now at risk. And this risk is captured by the second study on planetary boundaries. In order for the planet to support life, there are 9 boundaries, and in some studies there are now 12 and 13 boundaries that must be kept within range. And what we have been doing in these 250 years is we have been crossing some of these boundaries. The 2 in red, biosphere integrity, or what we call biodiversity, genetic diversity. And the second one is the biogeochemical flows, which is the flows of phosphorus and nitrogen through the natural cycle of the Earth. Both of them are now in the red zone. That means they are beyond uncertainty, they are being damaged. The 2 that are in the yellow zone, climate change, which is the carbon cycle of the Earth, and land systems change, are in some zone of uncertainty, but increasing risk. For 2 other variables, novel entities and atmospheric aerosol loading, both of these started only about 50 years ago with the advent of aerosols and new chemical entities. We don't have good quantification, so we don't know where they are. And for the others, like freshwater use, stratospheric ozone, ocean acidification, we are not crossing the boundaries, but at the same time, we are making things go in a particular direction that is worse from where we have been. So clearly, this is not a sustainable trajectory for humans if they want to survive on Earth. Add to this the economic, social, ecological, and health anxieties about the future. We are 7.7 billion people, going to be 10 billion by 2050. There is a huge social acceleration going on because of new technologies of telecommunications, mobility, digitalization, replacing travel, the fact that we can meet over here from many different continents is a witness to that kind of digitalization and social media. Increasing complexity and knowledge explosion. On the one hand, knowledge is exploding at unknown speed. Today, there are 50 million science publications since the beginning in 1665. There are 2.5 million new publications each year in science alone, 28,000 science journals in existence. Nobody can keep track of what amount of knowledge is getting created. And at the same time, while there's all this knowledge, we have a displacement, a profound displacement of truth by fake news, by conspiracy theories, by outright lies, by politicians and other interested parties to move their agendas forward. Economic anxieties. We know now that growth, something that we have pursued for 250 years of industrial civilization, is not a solution. We have a lot of economic growth happening, but it has also caused a lot of inequality. It has also caused a lot of debt. Global debt is around $233 trillion. Global GDP of about $80 to $84 trillion. And these are 2019 figures. And with the COVID boom, every country is printing out more debt. So these numbers are already old by at least 10 or 15% because of quantitative easing. And all that debt is debt that we are passing on to future generations, because there's no way that this level of debt can be supported by a $80 trillion GDP. If we were a household, if this earth was a household with 233 trillion income and 80 trillion debt, it would take multiple generations to pay it back. So we are basically living a lifestyle by imposing debt on future generation, including all of you among the students who are going to be suffering the consequences of this kind of economic growth. So growth is not a solution. GDP is the wrong thing to measure about growth, as has already been pointed out. And the inequalities are, of course, breathtaking. Middle class in the United States, which was sort of an ideal for a very long time, is now finding that their well-being and their economic interests have actually eroded over the last 50 years. Now, 0.7% of the world owns 46% of its wealth. In the United States, there are 3 men who own as much wealth as 160 million people at the lower end. This is not a sustainable, politically sustainable, or an economically sustainable situation. The more we grow, the more a few people accumulate wealth, and a large number of people remain in grinding poverty. Add to all of this, we have anxiety about climate change, biodiversity, COVID being an expression of that, and multiple crises in our systems. So this is the whole picture now. After 4.5 billion years of evolution, we have come to a new age that scientists have actually officially labeled the Anthropocene, as opposed to the Holocene, the period just before. Anthropocene refers to a period where humans and their activities, social and economic activities, drive nature's cycle. There is no such thing as nature anymore. We are the biggest force of nature, and we are changing nature, and we are changing its fundamental structure, not just in temperature that was pointed out earlier, but in phosphorus, in nitrogen, in water cycles, in carbon cycles. So we are fundamentally redesigning nature to our needs, not necessarily needs, but our wants and desires. And that is not a morally sustainable position for the earth to be in. There are environmental ceilings. There are natural ceilings of the ecosystem. If we exceed them, we are going to hurt ourselves. But there are also social foundations that we aspire to. The 10 billion people that are going to be on earth want to have adequate food and water and income and health and education, all the things that you see in the inner circle. Gender equality, resilience, social equity, energy, jobs, voice, dignity. So we need to be at a certain level, but we cannot exceed the environmental ceiling. So there is a safe and just space for humanity to exist in. And the challenge of the Anthropocene is to find the whole world to be in this green space on the diagram. A management alert here that earth scientists have identified financialization, defined as increasing importance of financial markets, motives, institutions, and elites in the operation of the economy and its governing institutions, as one of the key mechanisms by which human activity undermines the global biosphere. So let me move to the solution. And that I consider to be a harmonious transition to a planetary eco-civilization, a well-being economy, well-being corporations, and well-being education. Harmony, to me, is harmony with one's own self, harmony with others that we live with, in our own communities and the global or earth community, and harmony with nature, with animals and plants and natural ecosystems. We need to imagine humans in harmony with nature, and that is the vision of a planetary eco-civilization. This sort of a civilization, at least at the level of values and worldviews, is starting to emerge. I recommend the work of Paul Raskin, a colleague of mine from Future Earth, who has published this recent book on the Great Transition, where he's imagining supranational communities with humans and nature in balance, with collective action for good global citizens movements, and systemic resilience from climate change and from inequality and pandemics and biodiversity losses. In order to move to a planetary civilization, we will need to rethink the most fundamental historical notions of progress. The notion of a nation or any of these political jurisdictions. Nature does not define nation, state, or a province. It's a human category that needs to be rethought because nature extends over all of these political jurisdictions. And climate change doesn't see these boundaries, nor does water flows in a river. So we need to be rethinking at a very, very fundamental level, what is a nation state? What is freedom? Freedom to do what? Do we have the freedom to destroy the earth? And then the question of the good life. What is the good life? Is it the Western view of having material well-being? Should there be a spiritual element to it? How do we define good life for the future? And we need to move towards a systemic transformation of everything, of our economy, of the way we live, of the way we work, the way we play, where we live, etc. I think the Sustainable Development Goals of the UN Agenda 2030 provide a consensus, a global consensus on this kind of harmonious transition. They're not perfect. I just put them out over here I know all of you know these, but if you look at them, there are a few things I want to highlight. One is no poverty, zero hunger, good health and well-being, quality education, gender equality, clean water and sanitation, affordable and clean energy, decent work and economic growth, industry, innovation and infrastructure, reduced inequalities, sustainable cities, responsible consumption, climate action, life below water, life on land, peace, justice, and strong institutions, and partnerships and collaboration. These are not about the environment alone. Only 6 of the 17 goals are about the environment in terms of water and trees and biodiversity. Most of them are about social and environmental interactions. They are a holistic way of viewing a planetary well-being for all, not just for the rich countries, not just for rich people within poor countries, but for all. So the good news is that there is global consensus towards this transformation. And I think if we all work towards it, we have a good chance of overcoming this 250 years of unsustainable economic growth that we have experienced. So harmony in economic theory, I want to say that there is a whole new kind of economics emerging. The neoclassical economics, I think, is now shown its true colors, has been rejected as a sustainable economic model. It takes a long time for academic disciplines to reform, and it will take economics a long time to reform. But a new kind of economics is developing that I want to call well-being economics. And the growth national happiness is a form of that kind of economics. To me, it's the economics, an economy that is designed to provide human needs of food, water, health, education, shelter, energy, dignity, security, voice, and purpose for all. It's the economics of equity and fairness in resources, income, and wealth for communities, nations, generations, and species. And it is sized within the safe operating space of the planetary boundaries. The goal is of collective post-materialistic flourishing that recognizes spiritual dimensions of happiness, not just recognizes it, but also gives it centrality and the meaning as part of thriving as humans. It's not the endless and mindless pursuit of GDP growth. Many countries are now starting to adopt well-being as an important concept in economics and in their own economic policy. There are the Council of EU Policies, for example, is adopting well-being by allocating public resources for improving people's well-being, health, innovativeness, and efficiency. They are realizing that by focusing on these things, like well-being of aging, can curb healthcare and social welfare costs significantly. By providing more gender equality between men and women would raise GDP by 6 to 9% by 2050. And by focusing on preventative health, which currently is only 3% of their budgets, whereas curative health is 97%, but preventative health services are more efficient in providing overall well-being and reducing the cost of curative health. So well-being economics is picking up on the economic logic that the current dominant economies and dominant actors have already put into place and shifting the focus. It's like turning a big ship. So I think countries on the right-hand side, you see several countries that are starting to implement well-being. And this is a survey by Gallup Healthways of Global Wellbeing Index from 2014 and 2013. It's not the big countries like the United States or India or China that are taking leadership. It is the small size countries with Panama, Costa Rica, Puerto Rico, Switzerland. And even these countries are in the range of population of 5 million to 10 million people. What we need is a way of scaling the success of well-being policies across large nations where most of the human population resides. Now, in order to build well-being economies, you need the instruments of well-being economics. And the primary instrument of wealth creation for the last several thousand years has been corporations, particularly in the industrial period. So we need to imagine what well-being corporations would look like. You all at IIM Shillong and other IIMs are going to be running these corporations. So you need to think through what sort of a corporation is capable of delivering the well-being at an economic level and at scale. The purpose of the well-being corporation, and I want to acknowledge my work with Laszlo Zolnay. We have a paper on well-being corporations that we just finished writing. So some of this is a summary from there. The purpose is ecological and human well-being, not profit-making. They strive to be resilient rather than efficient and cutting back on resource use just for the sake of efficiency. Resiliency is a bigger concept. The products and services that they make are responsive to needs of multiple stakeholders. Success is not measured purely by financial success. It includes impacts on people and the environment. The long-term orientation of mindful of natural cycles, carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus, and of resource cycles. That means the resources that you take out of the ground by mining or agriculture, you need to put back into the ground through recovery and recycling procedures. And patient investment. Investment that is not looking for a 1-year return or a 2-year or 3-year return or a 5-year return, but a return that is consistent with the natural cycles of the earth. So some things might have a return of 75 years. If it's a forest that you're going to cut down, it takes 75 years for the forest to regrow. And you need to tie your own financial orientation to the natural cycles of earth. Otherwise, you will be eroding those cycles. Distributed ownership and governance and well-being of the workplace and decision-making. There's a lot more detail in the paper for those of you who are interested in reading it. At the heart of corporations is finance. Money talks. Most companies work, and unless we change the function of finance and accounting, which goes with it, we will not be able to create well-being corporations. So I want to say a few words about this. And first, that financial logic controls all the global biomes. Amazon rainforest, boreal forests of the higher altitudes, oceans, and the quality of water. These are all controlled by financial logic of where we make investments. And these biomes are critically dependent for stability of climate and ecosystems. And finance impacts all of them. And I can give you some examples a little later. Financial investments in the extractive sector of mining and in the real estate sector erode landscapes and ecosystems. Neoclassical economics doesn't bother about these things. It is short-term performance, accumulation of capital by capital for capital, externalizes costs of private investments, fueling the tragedy of the commons, and looks for shareholder maximization. And in some versions now, people talk about stakeholder maximization, but it's still about value maximization and value measured in a very limited way. So clearly, neoclassical economic approach to financing does not work. Well-being finance moves from the logic, financial logic on sustainability to sustainability logic on finance. That means coming up with instruments and policies for creating a sustainable Anthropocene. The most important thing to be done by finance, in my view, and by business education in general, is to make the bridge between what we call finance and economics and the real bio-eco world that we live in. Currently, there's no connection. In a recent meeting with the G20 central bankers, I had raised a question of what does it do when central bankers reduce the interest rate of an economy by 0.5%. And they said, oh, well, it'll create employment, it'll make capital available, and so on and so forth. They gave me all answers that were endogenous to their economic measures. But they had no answer for what it does to water, what it does to land, what does 0.5% of interest do to trees, to bees, to agriculture. So we have had a system in which finance and economics operates in its own sphere, disconnected from the reality of the world. And we need to change that. We need to bring finance into the logic of how the world economy, the productive economy of nature operates. It's a huge charge. There's a lot of research that needs to be done. But I know there are some smart finance faculty and accounting faculty at IIM Shillong who are up to that task. Okay, so I come to my last slide over here, and I said I don't have very much to say about happiness, except that I am viewing it as living within a global carbon budget. And I picked this example because I think this also brings home the role of business schools and business corporations. All of you know that we are in the midst of a global warming crisis. It is caused by excessive carbon. We are emitting more and more carbon into the Earth's atmosphere. There are these graphs that you see on the screen that are all indicative. On the left-hand side, you see what we have been doing for thousands of years. We've had carbon within a range of about 180 to 260 or so parts per million. Now, in the 21st century, it has shot up to over 400 parts per million. And just last week, the observatory in Hawaii that measures these reported 438 parts per million. So we are clearly going in the wrong direction. We need to control this carbon. And scientists have told us that humans burn about 40 gigatons of carbon per year. Burning 565 gigatons of carbon will raise the global temperature by 2 degrees centigrade. And 2 degrees centigrade is a really bad situation. You will not recognize Earth as Earth if we reach 2 degrees. There will be floods, and there will be forest fires, and there will be deaths, and there will be agricultural losses. So we don't want to be at 2 degrees. And we have only 565 gigatons of carbon left to burn to reach that temperature. So this can be seen as a kind of budget of total carbon on Earth. And the job of young managers is now to see how we build an economy, how we build corporations within this carbon budget. Because if we don't, I can guarantee you unhappiness for everybody, for all of future. So businesses and states currently own 2,795 gigatons of fossil assets. These are assets that are already on the books of companies and sovereign funds. We have already converted it into money and debt. So if we are going to meet our carbon budgets, we need to find ways that we don't exceed the 565 that's in the budget. So almost 2,200 gigatons of fossil or carbon assets will have to be prevented from burning. These are what some people call stranded assets. The size of these assets in terms of real today's dollars is very controversial. I have that number of 27 trillion on the current oil prices, but it's a fictitious number, I acknowledge it. But the financialization of those assets increases their impact in the global economy by 10 times. Moving to a low carbon lifestyle and economy will be decided not by you and me, not by the masses. It will be decided probably by 1,000 managers working in 100 companies that control this carbon. You might be lucky to be one of them or might not. But it will be a managerial decision because stranded assets are on the books. To remove things from the books requires management decisions, requires corporate decisions, requires investor agreement, requires all kinds of things. There is deep implication between carbon and the economy. And some people will have to parse it out. So for IIM and for all business schools, understanding the carbon logic, the carbon budget, carbon ethics, and carbon responsibility, to me, is a precondition for any kind of happiness in the future. I'll stop there. If there is time still available, I'm not sure, I'm not watching, but I'm happy to answer any questions or take comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This has been an amazing evening for all of us. And there are a couple of questions that have come into our chat box, but they are kind of longish and we have had a long day. So what we plan to do is we compile the questions because we have decided that we shall keep in touch. So over mail, some of these questions will be sent across so that we can have that conversation going for a longer period of time. So I am sure my co-chair, Professor Sanjay, would agree to this. So this is an amazing evening for all of us, like I was saying. So thank you very much. Both the speakers put in their views so very succinctly, and I'm sure that we will have a lot to talk about in the rest of the foundation course. Like I said in the beginning of the program, we have decided to plant samplings in honor of each of the speakers. We have called them the sapling of hope in the celebration of life. And we have a photograph of that, and there is a small little memento that has been made. So I'd like to share the memento virtually. So here we go. Thank you very much, Dr. Paul Srivastava. It's been an honor to have you with us again. And thank you for holding our hands since 2008. And we look forward to your continued help, support, and guidance. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I look forward to seeing that planting grow into a big tree when I visit your campus.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, sir.
So we are very thankful, and I know that it has been a long day, and we start off again very early tomorrow morning. So I know it was very uncouth of me to have not allowed the questions to come in, but I saw that the questions were coming in strong and fast, and we could not accommodate most of them. So we are keeping it for future correspondence between us and you. Thank you very much, sir. And thank you very much, Professor Sanjay Mukherjee and Mr. Dasho Maura and the rest of the dignitaries and students who've been there with us so patiently during this entire time. Thank you very much, and good evening.
Bye-bye. Namaskar.
Namaskar. So this marks the end of day 1.